But I want to go back to issues of healing, trauma, just generally, maybe just like processing old wounds or whatever it might be. In your book, you talk about sharing the purge. And I've heard Martin Ball, who you mentioned many times in your book, describe like events like this where he would, like, someone would be struggling and he would like put his hand on their chest and then he would vomit. And then later the experience of the participant was that like he was vomiting for them because their energy was stuck or something. Um,
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about this idea of sharing the purge and the role that can play in the sort of like the healing potentials of a mind meld, psychedelic mind meld experience?
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, just to give you a sense, where this whole thing started actually was with this very scenario, where I was at an ayahuasca ceremony in Mexico, and I've talked about this quite a bit, with a close friend of mine, someone who was struggling with substance abuse, which was one of the reasons he wanted to try ayahuasca, but didn't want to try it locally because, of course, professional reputations and everything. He didn't want to be found out. Of course, it'd also be illegal. Uh, so we found ourselves in Mexico, wanting to do some sporting events in a particular town. And the shaman that I'd been working with called me up and she's like, "Oh, yeah, we're doing this ceremony in Mexico." And I'm like, "Oh, where's that?" And she's like, "Oh, in this town." I'm like, "Well, strangely enough, talking about synchronicity, if you want to drop into to Carl Jung and others, that's where we are, and so it was the perfect opportunity to go to this ceremony for both of us, and we went. The first couple nights, he really struggled, which, of course, for someone struggling with substance abuse, is pretty normal. So it was pretty dark and lots of vomiting and feeling very sick as the ayahuasca is working to heal that which he has poisoned himself with, which in this case was alcohol. And we got into the third night, and frankly, not much had been happening for me, which, I've been doing ayahuasca for a number of years already, and I was quite disappointed, especially, given the adepts, the shamanic level who were there. And anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, third night, not much is happening, and why am I here? And well, I'm really there for my friend, like I was really wanting to support him. So I drop into a meditation. And let me just throw this out because we haven't talked about it, but just being able to meditate, of course, which a lot of Westerners are not that familiar with or not good at, is a really important skill in terms of doing this work. Being able to sit completely still and be okay with a lot of weirdness and difficult things coming up, which may be physically uncomfortable, is a really important skill. And so, anyways, I'm sitting there and I'm meditating, opening my heart to just kind of share at a very vague, kind of general level with my friend, and really not having any expectation around that. And all of a sudden, I feel like within a couple of minutes, this massive surge of energy shoot up my spine and through my body. And he's sitting to my right, and all of a sudden, my right arm just spontaneously just reaches out and grabs his head. Kind of similar to the Vulcan mind melt thing. And at that point, again, I've been doing psychedelics for quite some time, so it's like, okay, well, this is really weird. I don't know what this is, but I'm feeling okay with it, and I'm pretty good with, just observing the weirdness. And so this is happening, and then all of a sudden, my body starts to quake. My arm is quaking, and my body's vibrating, but it's very uncomfortable. The next thing, I'm crying my eyes out, like I'm sobbing, and there's just this profound grief pouring through me. And there's no story attached to it. I don't know what's going on, but I certainly am very aware of the emotion. And tears streaming down my face, and it's all very difficult. And I'm holding his head, it's probably 20 minutes to half an hour. Of course, it's hard to be sure of time in this context, but it was a fairly long time. And eventually it ended. And there were lots of other stranger things that happened the night. I actually started breaking into fractal energetic yoga after that. But of course, the big question is, well, what was that about? So the next morning, I asked my friend, like, obviously we had this connection and this strange experience. What was it like for you? And he described how he had a daughter who died. I think she was about 4 or 5. from a disease, and he was a physician. And so you can imagine, right? Like a physician not able to stop or prevent the death of his young daughter being a very difficult thing to go through. And he had never grieved that. That's what he told me, that he had never grieved the death of his daughter, and that this experience was the first time in his life, well over 20 years later, that he began to reach into the emotional grief around her death. And yeah, I mean, that's the depth of it, right? Like something in terms of our co-creative connection, if you want to describe it that way, really opened something up and released something that was, yeah, very difficult for him and obviously was held very deeply within him.
Yeah, it's this the shared purge thing is something that that I find very interesting and have for a long time. I've also had a number of experiences in my life where I felt as though I was grieving on behalf of someone else, or their energy was moving through me, and have had that person say later that they had that exact experience as well.
Mm,
That it was as if I was like my grief, my crying, my, you know, my emoting was like helping lessen the load of how much they were moving. And I've also had the experience in reverse. So I think it's another expression of sort of what's beautiful and possible between us when we sort of are able to connect on that level.
mm.